Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. We will wait for everyone to come from the waiting room. Thank you for waiting patiently there and join us here online. So give us a few minutes to let everybody in. Hi, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Before we jump in, and thank you, everybody, for joining. We do have quite a full group of people joining us today. My name is Uma Mishra-Newberry. I am on the Interim Committee for Women's March Global, and we are one of the organizations supporting this consultation session. Just a few housekeeping notes as we have over 90 people registered for this call. If you are not speaking, please make sure that you are on mute so that we can hear everybody else. And you certainly do not have to have your video on. If you are experiencing internet connectivity issues, it's recommended that you turn your video off so you can increase your bandwidth as well. This call, if for whatever reason your Zoom connection fails, this is being live streamed on YouTube. If you go to the Women's March Global channel, it is being live streamed there, so feel free to join there, which you won't be able to participate in the breakout rooms if you do drop off, but you can still keep on following us. Additionally, we do have interpretation available. If you go down, for those of you who need Spanish interpretation, if you go down into your Zoom window, you'll see kind of a globe symbol, and you'll see, if you click that, you'll see Spanish language interpretation. Unfortunately, and Sylvia, I'm going to turn this over to you to apologize to our French colleagues.
Oui, et nous voudrons nous excuser à tous nos collègues francophones car nous n'avons pas le temps pour trouver un interprète en français, mais nous trouverons la façon de faire et de recevoir toutes vos demandes sur la consultation et nous partagerons les notes pour vos contributions en ligne. Merci. Mais en tout cas, si vous avez quelques doutes, vous pouvez toujours nous écrire dans les chat box qu'il y a en bas. Et oui, c'est tout. Handing over to you, Uma, again.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. You'll continue to hear pinging in the background as people who are in the waiting room join the chat. So apologies for that. But I want to welcome everybody to this session, the consultation with the Special Rapporteur on the rights of women to freely assemble and associate. As we are all aware, the rights of women and girls to freely assemble is becoming extremely restricted in many places around the world, whether that assembly takes place online or in the streets or even within our enclosed spaces. Women and girls face increasing restrictions, and our rights and the space to organize in support of our collective rights is shrinking. From government reprisal and silencing, restriction of funding in support of grassroots mobilization, and now a global pandemic where lockdowns and social distancing have been paired with state surveillance, the ability of mass mobilization for gender equality and women's rights faces unprecedented challenges. This is the reason for being here today on this call. And we want to, all of the organizers and the speakers, we want to thank you all for taking the time to join us. Your input here is incredibly valuable. So thank you. With that, I would like to welcome Clément Voulet, the UN Special Rapporteur on the rights to freedom of assembly and association. Thank you so much, Clément, for your time. And I'm going to turn this over to you to talk about the consultation process. Oh, 1 second, Clément, I need to unmute you here.
Sorry.
There we go. No. Super, c'est bon.
Okay,
Great.
great. Thank you very much, Uma. Good morning, everyone, dear friends. I'm pleased to join you today to discuss the experience of women, girls, and non-binary people in exercising their rights to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. I cannot be more grateful for your openness to engage with my mandate on this issue. My deep appreciation and thanks to Civicus, Women March Global, ERISA, Plan International, the women's major groups, and all civil society groups for collaborating to organize this great meeting. I know these months have not been easy for many of you, so I would like to thank you for taking the time to be here. My report to the General Assembly will be dedicated to the enjoyment of freedom of peaceful assembly and association rights by women and girls. My goal or my objective with this report is to celebrate the power of women's organization and movements. Women and girls are aspiring and leading mass mobilization and collective action across the world. I was lucky to witness yesterday during the march against the racism and discrimination in Switzerland here, how important the participation of women are in achieving and fighting against racism and discrimination. We have seen over and over that when women exercise their right to freedom of peaceful assembly and of association, impact and transformation follows. Change happens. Precisely because how powerful women's movements are, they are facing increasing attack. Women not only face well-documented pattern of state repression that men and those who identify with other identities also face, but many obstacles, challenges, and impacts that are gendered, intersectional, and based in deep-rooted discrimination social norms. These obstacles, challenges, and impacts are taking place in the broader context of a backlash against women's rights and gender equality and the resurgence of patriarchal ideas and sometimes violence, misogynistic, and homophobic behavior in certain parts of the world. Such pressures are directly undermining states' ability to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal, including SDG 5, which is achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls, and also to comply with international human rights obligations. Women-led organizations and movements are essential drive of democracy and more peaceful, prosperous, and sustained societies. If the aspiration of the Agenda 2013 are to be realized, states and other stakeholders or actors must recognize these threats and adopt measures to ensure women are empowered to lead and join together to improve people's lives. Before COVID-19, I had different plans to engage with women in civil society and social movements in regional consultations. This plan had to be canceled, unfortunately, for the reason you know. These online consultations allow me to engage with women, human rights defenders, and women in civil society and maintain this important conversation with you. I want to learn more about your experience in exercising your rights to freely assemble and associate, the challenge and opportunities that you have emerged in this work. What have you been the success of your work? How have COVID-19 affected your right to freely assemble and associate? And most importantly, what key recommendation will you like me to recommend to the UN bodies? I'm looking forward to listen to your experience and discuss ideas on how my mandates can continue to contribute and collaborate around these important issues. I want also you to understand that my main purpose is to celebrate and to looking at. It's true, as I mentioned, for a long time women were discriminated, women face challenge, but we have to recognize today that women are building the world, women are building society, and I want to listen to those experiences. I want to know what are the impacts, how today you are prevented to do this work, how today you are prevented to be part of building this global world. Thank you very much, and I hope to have a fruitful conversation with you. Please let us be open and discuss any issues that you think may be important to be discussed and that you think also should be contained in my report. Thank you very much, and happy to continue this exchange in a group or whatever setting you would suggest.
Merci, Clément. Thank you so much for your introduction and for the recognition of why this consultation session is so critical. We are going to move now to really setting the scene around freedom of association and assembly, and we have a list of speakers that we are going to be hearing from around the world. For the first speaker, who is Alexandra from CSPP, this is a quick note for those of you who do not speak Spanish. You need to go down into the Zoom chat and go into interpretation and click on English, because she will be speaking in Spanish. So please go ahead and do that. Now, our first speaker and our first intervention is from Alexandra from CSPP, and she is from Colombia. Alexandra, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you. ¿Todos me escuchan en inglés? ¿Está bien? That's okay. Bueno, tenemos que agradecer mucho la oportunidad de este espacio, no solo la presencia del relator, sino la participación de todas las mujeres principalmente y personas que nos escuchan en este momento. Frente a la participación y el derecho, digamos, de las mujeres en particular en Colombia, digamos que habría que decir algunos aspectos relevantes. Colombia es uno de los países más difíciles para defender los derechos humanos. Es un país donde se asesina de forma permanente a quienes hacen parte de organizaciones sociales. Esto ha venido creciendo pese a un acuerdo de paz. Este año el asesinato de líderes y lideresas sociales ha aumentado en un casi 80%. Casi que cada 3 días estamos viendo alguna noticia sobre esto y las mujeres no son ajenas. Durante los últimos 2 años han sido asesinadas más de 55 mujeres por su labor de defender derechos humanos, por su labor de participar de organizaciones sociales y comunitarias. Entonces esto hace que la situación sea mucho más difícil. Y los asesinatos, por ejemplo, de estas mujeres tienen algunas características particulares. Son más violentos, incluyen violencia sexual y muchas veces se hacen para hacer casi que un mensaje público hacia las mujeres de que su rol no es la organización social, sino que su rol es la casa y las labores, digamos, domésticas. Entonces, eso ha hecho que la situación sea más difícil. Sin embargo, no es solo, digamos, el asesinato, también están las detenciones. Muchas mujeres son detenidas durante protestas, por ejemplo, no solo protestas que tengan solo el derecho de las mujeres contemplados, sino protestas en general. Colombia tuvo una álgida movilización el año pasado y a principios de lastimosamente llegó el COVID y ha bajado mucho la movilización, pero estábamos en un paro nacional. Y durante estas protestas se detuvieron muchísimas mujeres. Muchas de ellas fueron desnudadas en las estaciones de policía. La policía les daba mensajes alusivos pues, con claras connotaciones sexuales, fueron golpeadas. Digamos, son mecanismos que utilizan para casi que dar un mensaje de que no es tu lugar. Protestar no es tu lugar. Eso, digamos que se incrementa. Estas detenciones fueron administrativas, es decir, la policía tiene el poder de detener un poco a quien desee por 12 horas. Y adicional a esto tenemos ya las detenciones judiciales. Hay un caso de 3 mujeres detenidas hace más de 2 años en sus casas sin que hayan sido juzgadas por protestar contra una petrolera canadiense en este caso. Entonces, digamos que hay muchos mecanismos de restricción de derechos. La participación de las mujeres en los organismos de poder y de representación política ha caído muchísimo en Colombia. En las últimas elecciones, que fueron el año pasado, solo el 12% de las alcaldías son ocupadas por mujeres en todo el país. Y en la Cámara de Representantes son solo el 18%. No alcanza a haber una representación ni siquiera igualitaria. No por ello, digamos que no hemos tenido logros y éxitos. Algunos de ellos relativos a la protección del derecho de decidir de las mujeres. El año pasado se intentó penalizar todo aquello relacionado con la interrupción voluntaria del embarazo. Por suerte, a través de la movilización y del escenario de discusión jurídica se logró proteger por lo menos las 3 causales que ya teníamos. Queríamos que se ampliara, pero esto no fue posible. Hay un discurso antiderechos de mujeres, antiderecho de decidir, representado en el gobierno nacional, en el actual gobierno nacional. Y eso pues limita y digamos que estigmatiza mucho a las mujeres que planteamos una opción diferente frente a nuestros cuerpos. No sé muy bien cuánto tiempo me queda, pero bueno, creo que estos son como los elementos más generales, digamos, de la situación en Colombia. Es una situación crítica para todo aquel que defiende derechos humanos, pero para las mujeres que siempre hemos estado un poco más alejadas por muchos motivos de estos escenarios de participación, la violencia de actores tanto estatales como paraestatales hace que cada vez sea más difícil potenciar la organización. Hay, por ejemplo, mujeres en Casanare, la Asociación de Mujeres de Casanare, que es una organización solo de mujeres, donde su representante legal está detenida. Está detenida por participar en protestas y sobre todo por exigir vivienda digna para otras mujeres desplazadas y la asocian indebidamente con la guerrilla. Entonces lleva también más de 2 años detenida en su casa sin poder salir, sin que un juez la haya declarado culpable y con claras relaciones que nos parecen preocupantes entre la justicia, actores privados y la fuerza pública. Sin embargo, hay mucha participación, ha venido incrementándose. Lastimosamente el COVID ha restringido muchísimo el derecho de participación y reunión. En Colombia, a diferencia de otros países, no se han logrado tener movilizaciones masivas. La situación es muy crítica aún, pero pues digamos que esperamos que esto pueda cambiar pronto. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, for your statement. We now move to Corlette from Curisa in South Africa. A reminder to everybody to please switch back your translation.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairperson. I also want to recognize the presence of the Special Rapporteur, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for the Human Rights Institute to participate at this very important engagement. I was giving an opportunity to give a bit of a context of the civic space, the challenges that we have, and the opportunities that have emerged in this work with a focus on freedom of association and assembly. And also to look at whether there are promising opportunities or supportive practices to reflect on. For example, to add on what the Special Rapporteur's report will be deliberating on. For us in South Africa, I think I must say that I must begin by stating that it is a country that has been really declared as anti-women. For example, this is based on the number of murders that have been committed to women and young girls. That has not changed even during the time of COVID-19. I think COVID-19 imposing its own hardships on nations and with the responding mechanisms that are so restrictive, it made situations of women human rights defenders even more harsh and more difficult. It has increased the impunity that we have seen, sometimes feeling that it has been tolerated or accommodated because law enforcement has been committing most of the criminal activities. And then also we've seen that even at community level, the public, members of the public, for example, where women have become so vulnerable in the lockdown and murders committed to women and young girls. The women in South Africa, and I guess this is a perception that we have around the world, is that women are the changers of the world. They are here to change the status quo. And then it is also for their role is to change the traditional norms and the stereotypes, and to change how women are perceived, and for women to be respected. They are bringing economic change, they are bringing equality, and they are bringing promotion and protection of human rights in the society generally without discrimination. With South Africa being one of the countries that is presenting a state report on CEDAW, Convention on the Elimination of Violence Against All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, we have a concluding observation that was highlighted by the CEDAW committee. They have described the patriarchal attitudes of South Africa that are so deep-rooted, and they are sustaining the subjugation of women in both public and the family. This is one of the problems that we have. We have living law and the written law, the law which is in statute and the law which is practiced, the law that perceives women as subservient, the law that perceives women as an instrument of violence, as instrument of even rape being used as an instrument of war. It's so prevalent in South Africa. We have legal frameworks that are perpetuating that. We believe that if some of the legal mechanisms that are in place could open up opportunity or to be harmonized with the Constitution, the way the women are perceived or are treated or rights violated could bring change. It could transform the mindset of institutions and of leadership. We have a legislation called Traditional Leadership Governance Framework Act 41 of 2003. It has been amended in 2009. And the way it has been amended, it is trying to become more progressive to align itself with the constitutional values. For example, it promotes the right to equality. It promotes recognition of all rights that are in the Bill of Rights. It has also promotes South Africa's international and regional mechanisms that it has committed or adopted. In terms of the Bill of Rights, we see that there's freedom of association and assembly, the right to equality, and the prevention of unfair discrimination, and the human dignity, the right to life, and for women to participate in political life. However, the Act makes a very contradictory provision where women are given 30% to be representative in the Traditional Council. Now, this is where we see less women playing a role at community level, or where we see lack of acceptance of women to participate in different structures of government. Right now, we have the National Disaster Act. It is the act that is regulating the lockdown, that is assisting the country to curb COVID-19. It has created mechanisms like your advisory forum. It has also created another platform for volunteers at national, at local level. It means local authorities, they can engage with civil society or NGOs at this level, at advisory level. All the problems that we are seeing that form to engage the leaderships or the local authority on some of the problems that the women are facing. However, it has been very difficult to see or to confirm that we definitely have some of the advisory forum that are structures that are functioning at community level that allows women to participate. For example, right now, there's monitoring of violations of human rights. Law enforcement has been brutalizing citizens, especially the offenders of the lockdown. And women, they have been monitoring, for example, we are now on level 3 of the lockdown, where some of restrictive measures have been lessened. So there's some bit of freedom of movement, business is opening, and also the schools. There has been a dialogue and engagement encouraging schools to be reopened. Dates have been shifted up to the 8th, and all the time NGOs who are women human rights defenders on the ground, they have been bringing information to the leaders, to the Department of Education, informing them that it is not yet ready for the schools because they are not compliant with protocols such as sanitation, clean water, and also social distancing. And the Department of Education had gone ahead and it has provided information that actually 95% of the schools in the country are compliant, only 5%. But we can see that it is more than that. And then the learners that will be affected are those coming from marginalized communities where infrastructure development for water and sanitation is poor or non-existent. We have seen how women human rights defenders that are engaging at this level have been restricted to enter premises to monitor even the parents, those that are parents, to ensure that parents come in to monitor to see if the schools are compliant with the regulations.
Brilliant.
And
thank you
yes?
so much. I'm so sorry, but your time is up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We are going to now move to Mihaly, and I'm so sorry if I did not pronounce your name correctly. She's from Koban, from the Democratic Republic of Congo and Cameroon.
Thank you, Chairperson. I will try to be within my time. First, I would like to commend the UN Special Rapporteur Clément on calling on the UN to allow the staff to publicly join the Black Lives Matter historical movement. You know, we are slowly progressing towards a systemic change, especially during the global pandemic, and it's important that our leaders, institutions be part of the new narratives towards racial differences, and we shouldn't be turning our back, you know, to the struggle, and which deeply resonates with me as a Black woman, African advocate. So I really applaud your effort, and, you know, for setting out the tone for change, and thank you so much. And my role here, it's really to highlight the role of women coming in solidarity on the continent, and I will briefly speak about, because of time, about the Francophone Africa that is often, as we say, that is often forgotten in the map when we address this kind of issues. And although most of the issues are in those certain part of this country, such as countries in the DRC where I'm from, and I've done a lot of the bulk of my work in Cameroon, Gabon, and I've done work in the G5 Sahel in Somalia as well. But this has been a 20 years journey of really prioritizing the women's and girl agenda to play a vital role in coming in solidarity to promote lasting peace and active engagement in peace processes and building national and regional movement across the continent. And I've come to learn that gender parity does not stem from a lack of innovation. These young women and girls don't lack innovation or hard work, but it's rather from oppression and human rights violation as marginalized girls and women, and we are all living under a patriarchy system and a severe shortage of opportunity for women and girls. Pre-COVID, in the DRC, Chalupe had launched Feminists in Action, which is a regional advocacy platform bringing feminists from 10 Francophone countries really to come together to address the shrinking space and the myriad of issues, which include geographic disparities in their countries. But unfortunately, because of COVID and the limited access to resources, even to host an online workshop or training, has been really one of the biggest issues. And these young women across these countries decided to come together to really discuss national importance while trying to hold, even in the time of COVID, the government accountable to move from commitment to actions as a key priority. And having worked in Cameroon, and for those who are familiar with the political context of the country, Cameroon is one of the countries that has adopted and ratified almost everything, you know, the special measure concerning the elimination of all form of discrimination against women and participation, and also recommended legal and temporary measure. But while working there, that's how I realized how important women's movement can reshape a nation democracy by demanding the government and institution to pay attention to women issues such as women, peace and security, gender-based violence, women political participation and all. Despite the ongoing crisis, and of course the Boko Haram insurgency in the far north, and the human rights abuses and also forth. In the midst of all the chaos, there was a dear need of women and girls from all walks of life and the 10 regions of the country to come together in solidarity in the national level, and that is how CAOPEM birthed it. CAOPEM, Cameroon Women Peace Movement, birthed in August 2019. So it's a new movement, but a new movement that really fought to have a seat at the table during the national dialogue in September, a few weeks after they really started of their operation. And I recall vividly how we work together on drafting position papers so CAOPEM can really position themselves as a key peace crusader in Cameroon, to really play that critical role in strengthening solidarity within the feminist movement. In one hand, and another hand, it's playing a role in community mobilization and sensitization, and even during COVID, and also addressing some of the gender-based violence coming together in visual candles. So there's a lot of work that has been done in these different countries, and I really want to put an accent in Cameroon because it's really a country that took us by surprise from being one of the stable country in the Central African sub-region, and now has just took a turn and a shift, and seeing women, over 500 plus women coming together, you know, regrouping 70 organizations across the country, you know, to really push that agenda, including women into peace talk and taking advantage of coming together as a movement and drawing from each other's experience, really, and pressing on the issue as one voice that needed to be heard and considered. But one of our biggest concern is, and now I kind of want to focus on my sub-region, is that we are still invisible. Women and girls of the Central African sub-region are still invisible when we are talking about these issues of freedom of assembly and association. Our stories are now really being told. It seems like our fight for freedom of assembly and association have yet to be validated and recognized. And in this case, you see that gender disparity is profound. I recall an example, if today I had to ask anyone in the room right now at the moment, who is Maurice Kamto in Cameroon, everybody will remember the name. Oh my God, he's a Cameroonian presidential candidate fighting for freedom of assembly and speech. But no one will remember Michel Ndoki, who's a renowned Cameroonian women's rights lawyer, who actually represented Kamto and defended Kamto for the partial annulment of the elections, and during the post-electoral litigation hearing. And she herself, along with Kamto, they've been detained for over 6 months for fighting for freedom of assembly and speech and association. So, but for that is, I mean, we need to create a space, and we need to create a space and change the status quo. And I feel like that we are constantly asking for permission at places where we shouldn't be asking for permission at all. So I think right now at the moment, we have decided to use our voice and to create a space for more justice and building the capacity and inviting women. I would have expected seeing more young women activists during these consultations and really having more working session to help us really how we can improve our laws. We're talking about countries like DRC, we're talking about countries like Central African Republic, Cameroon, and you know, Equatorial Guinea, who has no whatsoever created a space for women and girls there in civil society are particularly non-existent in this part of the countries. And so we need more to have this kind of conversation with you, Clément, and partners, and to see how we can talk about solution to rethink the new legal framework and to redefine the solidarity in the implication of women's and girls for systemic change, and in particular during the COVID. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mehi. The next intervention that we have is from Amal from Women's Major Group Palestine. Amal, turning it over to you. I can hear you, Amal.
Greeting, and thank you for having me. My name is Dr. Amal Hudhud. I'm a volunteer of the several civil society and NGOs, and I'm a member since many years in Women Major Group. I hold a doctoral degree in environment engineer, and I participate in multi-activity conference inside Palestine and outside Palestine in several themes, including human rights and global change. I'm also a member and coordinator consultant of Sustainable Development Planning Strategy Committee in social services space in my country. In this committee, my role is to analyze the status of women and vulnerable group, especially their needs, and based on their need assessment, and then define the most important development goal and indicator, in addition to set the development program that can include included in the development plan of the city. Given my background and my study, I setting also the plans for disaster risk reduction in the country and creating the linkage between women role and these plans, aiming at protecting natural resources and energy. In addition to that, I participate in updating the development plan to match the SDGs and Agenda 2030, while to ensure that the SDG cross-cutting in all implementation process. I actually help many NGOs by writing resources mobilization proposal seeking sustainable financial resources and networking among these civil society organizations and possible or potential donors. I put women empowerment goals and women rights on the top of my work, and I advocate of these goals on the decision-making level. I usually discuss this goal with the decision maker wherever I participate and convey the message of Women Major Group through the regional gathering and forums such as the Arab Forum for Sustainable Development. And I remember that I advocate to add the status of Palestinian women, especially in the final statement of the Arab Forum Sustainable Development, since we have specific conditions and circumstances, being the only country in the world that still are under the occupation. Having such a statement articulating the sensitive condition of our women and consider the real success to me as I try to convey the image of our woman to the whole world and to the global human rights basis. Therefore, I'm lucky also to take part in writing some inputs in our country's volunteer national review, because this gave me the chance to elaborate on the challenges and gaps, and at the same time highlight the success stories of our government and our women engagement modalities. As a feminist from Palestine, also I always bear to and combine the message of women and their right to access freedom of expressions and assembly, and also their right to access equitable health services, especially reproductive health, water and natural resources, and access to their land as a key issue and very important. Nowadays, also I'm working with others, with several feminists, to have tailored in-depth study on the impact of COVID-19 on the women in Palestine, in terms of potential shrinking of civil spaces allocated for them to speak freely, and financial impact also, which is very important, that lead also to several consequences on their accessibility to their rights. It is my pleasure to share to share with you the challenges that we face in our society as women. We first either as a culture and as the occupation. So as a culture, the cultural, traditional, and the social background challenges and control the and govern our feminists to move in Palestine, and also it is affect all the entire region. Also, we have the laws, regulation, and legislation. It is very old. It is since 1967. So still all these rules, it is we use it, which is very old, and it is don't give the right to the woman. We try to change and to update this regulation, but still we don't have implementation, or we don't have the agree to all of these laws. In addition to this, to the cultural and to the laws, which is very old, also we have poverty and high rate of unemployment. Women can't access to the capital to make their own project. Their project. Also, there is low salaries. Even as the space and the market, it is with for the man. What woman work is close to her natural work as at house. Also, we have one of the challenges is gender-based violence. 37% of Arab women have experienced some form of violence. 14% of the Arab girls marry under the age of 18. Even in Palestine, we try to change this law and to not allow for the woman to marry under the 18. But during the COVID, there is no implementation of this, and still the family married allowed the woman to marry under 18, and there is no control on that. In Palestine, in addition to all of the above, what I mentioned, challenges, we have different challenges in addition to that, which is the occupation. The occupation which control the freedom of expression and assembly by confiscating land, arresting the activists and feminists, and also destroying their house owned by them. Even when man also in our country, even if he arrested, the woman also work as breadwinners and add extra burden on their shoulder in addition to their family due to this occupation practice. So she can also take the role of man, even if he arrested or if he died during the political situation. Also, as my colleague also talked about COVID-19, there is very impact on the Palestinian or in the Arab region, that woman more violence. Woman can't even talk. Her partner is at the house making many violence. There is no court. It's difficult to access to her, even if she had some problems. Even there is no nurseries. She can't even work, and at the same time she can't participate in the online any online activity because she has many things to do. In Palestine, we don't used to go for online teaching, so it is more burden on women to teach her kids, and in addition to do the house work. In addition, what as a civil society, what we have we have space to do. What we need to do is lobby and advocate on the government and the international world to counter the occupation practice. Also, we have to mobilize the resources in order to improve women's lives, building capacity and knowledge transfer, to create relation between the women, NGOs, and civil society, to promote the concept of gender mainstreaming, create confidence between the public and civil society, which will form support. We need public support to the woman group, create confidence between public civil society to support, as I said, develop and build capacity to have balanced work firms so they engage in political, social, and local development. Speaking about Palestine, as a Palestinian woman, we face many difficulties, so we gain experience in dealing with the difficulty during the political situation and the many crises and many disasters. So we gain experience, we can even we can share this experience with others. As a final point, my recommendation, just very 1 minute, my recommendation is to proceed inciting international community to speak against Israeli occupation, pushing the government to change the laws, the old laws, and the regulations, because it is very old, create mechanism to finance the deployment structure, create media outlet and international support, lobby to ensure government commitment to employ women and ensure their participation, ensure women engagement in writing up the national critical documents, creating realistic and effective microcredit and economical support. We need support, more and more support, networking with our partnership with the global and international civil society. We need to be engaged so we can face the barriers and challenges together. We have in our country, so networking, inter and regional support is needed, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amal. Thank you. I know it's so hard to retain a statement in 6 minutes, so thank you so much for doing that. Our last intervention is from Sudita. She's from Plan International, Asia and Pacific region. Sudita, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Good evening from Thailand. Thank you so much for having us, Plan International, as a part of this online consultation. So please allow me to take this opportunity to highlight the rights of girls and young women in general, and in particularly for the Asia. So Plan International, as a child rights-based organization, has been mobilizing opportunities for children, particularly marginalized girls and young women, to freely assemble and associate in an enabling and safe space as a part of our program and advocacy work. Last year, to celebrate International Day of the Girls in October, girls and young women participated in over 301 million campaign actions globally under our global Girl Get Equal campaign. This campaign is engaging and supporting young people as drivers of change, demanding that girls take part in all decisions affecting their lives, defending their right to freely assemble and speak out, calling out discrimination and stereotypes in public media. In the Philippines, for example, through this campaign, girls and young women influenced on the developments and passings on the Safe Space Act in 2019, and also influenced on the national report of the Philippines government in relation to the Beijing's Plus 25 platform for action. For the International Day of the Girls this year, we will focus on freedom online, which will look at how we can make sure girls and young women can be active and assemble freely and safely online. That's our achievements, but also we also facing some challenges and opportunities, and there are also some intersectional issues as well. So Plan International believes that girls and young women face specific challenges and opportunity to their rights of assembly and associate due to their age and gender. For challenges, I would like to focus here on the online space due to time limitations. First of all, girls and young women are disproportionately targeted by online harassment and abuse, given that the COVID-19 pandemic has driven more functions and interactions of our daily lives online, including assembly and association. It's reasonable to assume that the instances of online abuse and harassment have increased, but there is a crucial lack of data to measure these abuses, especially in the global south. We already know, however, that women are 27 times more likely than men to be harassed online. Secondly, the gender digital divide in access to internet remains largest in the world's least developed country at around 33%. In terms of mobile phone ownership, the gender digital divide is most pronounced in South Asia, where women are only 26 less likely to own a mobile phone than men. Considering in particular for marginalized girls and young women in a remote area, accessing to a smartphone to stay connected seems to be an issue, given the power outage or the lack of electricity in some areas, such as in Timor-Leste. In addition, during COVID-19, persistent gender norms are still evident in Asia, particularly on the roles of girls and women at home. Girls and young women are expected to work more on the household chores and take care of other siblings, while are also struggling with different homeschooling schedules. This limits their participation in joining assembly and organizations and in achieving their full potential. For intersectional issue, while gender is an important aspect to look at, there are other dimensions to consider, including age and diversity as well. The needs, capacity, opportunities, challenges of a person with 10, 15, or 20 years old are very different, and there are required different approaches, responses, and appropriate mitigation measures. Most of the time, girls and young women are not able to fully and meaningfully participate in adult-dominated spaces, even in the more organized groups. Girls are experiencing many different issues than women, such as child early forced marriage, teenage pregnancy, lack of access to sexual reproductive health rights services and information, and economic dependence. Looking at diversity, if all important, for example, we know that disability can impact the capacity to exercise one's right to participate in public life. The COVID-19 pandemic has subjected certain groups of people to increased racism and harassment, both online and offline. Women and girls of Asian origins are now subjected to double harassment online because of their gender and their ethnicity. Even we are facing a lot of challenges, but also there are many opportunities. So with the advent of the social media and new technologies, smartphone can now be used for complete media production in the Philippines. There is youth reporters project where girls and young women are able to build their confidence and recognize their right to be heard and take leadership in matters that affect them. There are trends under this project and began to build their own networks of youth reporters who proactively put the learning in practices and as a young citizen journalist and media literacy advocates. During the pandemic, they developed the content around COVID-19 and those were aired on the radio station and put on the social media. In Indonesia, one girl and one young woman from National Youth Forum and Coalitions attend a virtual online consultation with 2 ministers and provide their collective inputs from their peers regarding the online education during COVID-19. Lastly, the LGBTQI community has been very active in some countries in Asia, and this opened opportunity for girls and young women to rally with them with similar causes and advocate particularly on sexual reproductive health. I would like to end my presentation with the screens. This is some example of the, can you see now? So this is the example of the materials that developed by the Youth Reporters Network. So the first one that is, the highlights about the gender equality, and there are also some about, how to purport coughing and sneezing, and they also even create some games. This is only for your example that how creative those young women are, and then they use social media to as a channel to advocate on this particular issue. So thank you so much. That's it for me.
Thank you so much, Suvita. So now we move into the part of the discussion where we will have breakaway consultations in groups. We have assigned everybody groups based on your responses, but we also had to randomize the breakout session, so you may not be in the rooms that you prefer, but you will have time to really go through the core questions. Masana will put in the chat box, and we will send this to you when you're in your breakout rooms, the document where we encourage people to take notes. The way that the breakout rooms will work is the following. Each room will have a moderator, and that moderator will help encourage and facilitate the discussion. If you can collectively come up with one or two people that can help take notes on the document link that Masana has provided in the chat box, please do so. Your notes are incredibly valuable to Clément and will help in the additions for his report. The breakout rooms, you will be sent to them automatically. So do not log out of Zoom. What you'll see is a little bit of a pause when you move to the breakout room, and then you'll be in a room of about 10 or 12 other people. Additionally, when it's time to come back to the main room, you will just be pulled back into the main room. So again, don't log out of Zoom. Everyone will come back and we will reconvene our discussion in the main room. You have 35 minutes to go through not only your main question, but if you have time, go through some of the other questions. The very last point that I will make is that if you can choose one person to really get a good understanding of what the discussion is around the core question, so that they can present it to the main group in about 2 to 3 minutes. So we're going to call on each group to have one person speak to what the main point was, so we can kind of round up that information. That would be great. So find someone to take notes and collect those notes. Find somebody to present your findings as a group as you return to the breakout rooms. And do not log out of Zoom. Whatever you do, it'll be a quick pause, and then you'll be in your rooms, and then you'll come back in 35 minutes. Okay? I'm going to now send everybody to their breakout rooms and have a fantastic discussion. One thing that I will say is that if your room doesn't seem to have a moderator, we're all organizers here, so if your room doesn't have a moderator and someone doesn't physically identify themselves as such, please someone step in and moderate the discussion. Thank you, everybody. I'm moving you to your rooms now.
Allô, allô? Allô?
Hi, Passy. You should have received a breakout room invitation.
I don't think so. I think we are in the break room right now.
No, there's 5 breakout rooms, and I've added you to room number 2.
Oh, okay.
So I will.
No, I think it doesn't work. It's not working on my side. Hello. Jill, can you hear me? Hello. Allô, allô? Hill. Ah, okay. She's online right now. Can you hear me? Allô? Are we still in the meeting? Or...
Yes, hello. We're just in the middle of a break right now. We have been taking...
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry.
Everybody, we have about 30 seconds left in our break time. Everyone can start heading on back to your rooms, please. Hopefully you were able to stretch, and hopefully you heard Misana's fantastic, we'll call it elevator music, playing in the background. Thank you, Misana, for that. All right. Seems like everyone is back. So in the final kind of portion of this call, we're going to start to pull it all together in terms of what you discussed in your breakaway rooms, breakout rooms, and the core questions that were also discussed during this time, where the speakers from each room will share their reflections. I invite you, if you have questions for any of our co-sponsors, to put them in the chat box. We will be moderating that chat box. So if you have any kind of pressing questions that you feel you haven't been able to get answered, or just want to have it answered in the larger group, put them in the chat box and we will do our best to get to them. We've already seen the question from Cynthia earlier, and we will get to that, Cynthia, in a bit. So what I would like to do is invite a speaker from the core question 1 group, and the core question 1 was, over the past year, what have been your experiences in exercising your rights to freely assemble and associate? Can someone from core group 1 please unmute themselves? And each speaker, by the way, has 3 minutes, and we are going to hold fiercely to that time because we still have a lot to get through and we want to be able to answer your questions. So who is going to be the first speaker from core group 1?
I've asked Sarah if she's available to report back for us. Sarah Zaman from Pakistan. Sarah, are you able to do that for us? Okay, I guess not. So I will switch on the timer for myself and try and adhere to the 3 minutes. Just opening up the notes. So generally, the conversation centered around really the intersections between the work of freedom of association and assembly that women have been doing and their intimate connection to broader rights around access to health, access to the rights to form unions and organizations. In a number of cases, we've seen that labor and student unions have been banned, such as or faced restrictions, such as in the US or in Pakistan. In Pakistan specifically, the use of no objection certificates as a way to legitimate participating in a process where you have to apply authority has been a particular hurdle. And we see a further deterioration of civic space across the board. And this deterioration of civic space is also a deterioration against democracy. Also, we see that women human rights defenders are having to defend their own security, but a success story coming from Princeton, New Jersey, was really the ability of a strong civil society presence led by women to form and build relationships with one another and with local authorities, which has meant that freedom of assembly has been generally protected in that context. But again, you know, across the board, and we had a case from Turkey, we're seeing reprisals in MENA, Sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. We also see an increase in levels of GBV and the deterioration of mental health conditions, including isolation, compounded by unemployment, poor funding, and school closures for girl and women activists. There's a lot we could say, but I think lastly, I'll then just turn to a point that was raised by colleagues, and I'm redacting names for security purposes. Just the rollout of surveillance technology in the context of an existing gender digital gap, but also online harassment targeted at women that we see around the world has meant that the pandemic has brought with it new textures of restrictions that have included amongst them this sort of surveillance on women human rights defenders and the legitimization of some protests or some forms of public engagement like going to the beach, and the delegitimization of protests such as those led by the movement for Black Lives or across the world, and how these have been frowned upon. So our notes are all in the doc, and people can add more if I've missed anything. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Anna, for that summary. Someone from core question 2 was, what have been some of the challenges and opportunities that have emerged in this work? So 3 minutes to summarize your discussion there.
Hi, everyone. I was requested to report back. I'll try to be brief, and if Ona would like to also comment towards the end, that would be great. I'll go over some of the challenges that were discussed, as well as the opportunities and recommendations in the second part. First of all, it was nice to have such a mixed group. We had representation from all these different regions. We talked about several specific cases as well as issues. I myself raised the problem of rising fascist, authoritarianist, and misogynist leadership in many countries, and how the modalities to attack on women's rights, and that includes attacking on their ability to organize, assemble, and associate, because there's so much stress on traditional gender roles. I also raised the issue of climate crisis and how important our freedom of association and assembly is for organizing and agitating for action, and how governments are using any means to restrict these protests. Our friend from Uganda, I'm not going to mispronounce this name, I'll just skip over, I'm sorry, shared about specifically within the COVID pandemic, how there's challenges for people with HIV/AIDS, the regulations about you can't go anywhere without masks, but there's no provision of masks. You have to use sanitizer, but there's there's very few places where it's available, and strong rural and urban divide apparent. This restriction on pregnant women also came up in relation to Bosnia as a protective measure for exposure to the virus. Some folks also brought up that, you know, there's no place to report on the issues with freedom of association. If you report to the state, they don't investigate, they don't include it in the national statistics. There's not even a first step of remedy. So that's briefly the challenges. And then successes, we really heard some great things about South Africa and the women getting together to submit recommendations on having a national action plan on GBV. They submitted a memorandum to the president and he received it. They're in a process. There's a teething problems here and there, but so far the outcome is looking good. We also talked about the importance of strengthening grassroots women's movement at the subnational level, because the big national level organizations are not always doing their work. And resources, it's so important. We cannot help and support women on this matter without resources. And finally, we said that aside from this report, it would be great for the Special Rapporteur to have more regular media statements and direct recommendations and engagement with government and civil society on this specific right, and in this current moment, not to misuse the pandemic to crack down on freedom of assembly and association or other fundamental freedoms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanam. Question number 3, if I can have someone from core question group 3, the question was, what have been the successes of your work? And again, 3 minutes.
Sure. So it seems that all of the successes that were achieved were also mixed in with some challenges. But the majority of successes had to do with the self-organization and organization of women and girls to tackle the pressing issues, including the ones that emerged with regards to the COVID-19 infection, including women organizing in the digital space. So we've heard from our colleagues in Asia Pacific region highlighting that girls have been more actively engaged in speaking out about their experiences, and they are more involved in mutual support groups, and their work has been helpful in the progress to eliminate child, early, and forced marriage, including sexual and reproductive health rights advocacy, among other issues. In Ethiopia, there are coalitions of women denouncing violence, gender-based violence, although there are some challenges with internet connection issues. And so with the newly emergent coalitions in the digital space, there's also challenges with access of women to those spaces. Although there seems that there are more actors involved in it, and there's like this global upsurgence of consciousness around women's issues. In Colombia, there was this helpful protection program that was set for women involved in social and human rights organizations. And there are also small wins concerning sexual and reproductive health issues for women. In Philippines, there are certain challenges of activists judged without due or arrested without due process, as well as some minimal successes. And then in Ukraine, there are some advances on women's leadership in trade unions working against gender-based violence in the workplace. Although currently there are really huge issues with anti-union legislation that is attempted to be passed during the lockdown when people have restrictions on protesting. And so if those draft laws are passed, then unions will have very limited means to organize and to leverage for the rights of women. So I think those are the basic points. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Svetlana. Now, question number 4, if I can have someone from the group from question number 4, which was, how has COVID-19 affected your rights to freely assemble and associate? And you have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. So there were a number of, I think, overall themes that emerged in our breakaway session. The first being that COVID-19 has essentially overtaken importance and precedence in relation to the work that CSOs have to do. So for example, in the case of Cameroon, where there was supposed to be this national convention for Cameroon women on peace building, to tackle government's response to the conflicts that are taking place there. This could not happen because of COVID-19, and as a result, this issue has been put on hold. The second theme that emerged is that many organizations have had to respond by going online and engaging with communities in alternative ways. But a challenge here is obviously digital literacy and accessibility of the internet, where in some grassroots organizations, communities, access to the internet is a big challenge. And in terms of long-term sustainability, some organizations were able to provide access to data now, but questioned in the long term, you know, there needs to be other plans put in place to make sure that internet access is available to women and girls in different regions. The other issue that we touched upon was online harassment being a big issue. As much as things have gone online, harassment seems to be a problem. Specific examples coming from Asia as well as South Africa, where there was a meeting on Beijing Plus 25 in Sudor, and this meeting was hacked and bombarded with pornography, inappropriate images, and as a result had to be cancelled or had to come to an end, so thus the work could not continue. Another important point to mention is that the care burden that is preventing women from participating in freedom to associate and assemble, I think that's a particularly important issue. And overall, COVID-19 has basically made gender equality and women and girls' rights issues take a back seat. Some recommendations that should be considered going forward is centering responses on the unique experiences of women and young girls, and recommending that governments tackle importance of accessible internet connections, particularly for young women and young girls, and including digital literacy. As we see things going online, accessibility, particularly in countries where internet access is still not possible for everyone, remains a big concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arti. And our last question, and we need a speaker from core group number 5. And the question was, what key recommendations would you have or would you give to UN bodies and member states to enhance the protection of women, including trans women and girls' rights, to freely assemble and associate? And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, everyone. I've been nominated to speak on behalf of group number 5. So I hope I'll do everyone justice. A lot was discussed. So one of the points that was made was around having public safe spaces. So just in public, the spaces should be safe for women and girls so that they can, in fact, also join assemblies, for example. And at the same, and this is also a particular issue in conflict settings, which was discussed. And in some settings where access is not even considered normal for women and girls at all. So that is something that definitely needs to be addressed to ensure that the right to freedom of assembly and association is respected. Similarly, within broader human rights assemblies and movements, ensuring that there is a space within those movements for women and girls and LGBTI as well was one of the issues that really was important too. Second point on this is also ensuring that women and girls and their organizations' voices are heard with respect to the different agendas and processes that are taking place at the global and regional level, including, of course, by the UN. Especially now that there's a lack of in-person political forums. So there's a real need to make sure that those voices are heard and integrated. There was a mention of the strength of and role of networks of women human rights defenders and focal persons of that can represent the voices of many women and girls, particularly at the community level, to help ensure that no one is left behind. This year, we also have a number of milestones for women's rights, such as Beijing, Women, Peace, Security, etc. Yet there still remains to be a very strong disconnect, especially when it comes to women and girls at the grassroots level. And how do we make sure we bridge this and hold states and also the UN accountable to ensure that those voices are heard? One of the things that was recommended in that context also strengthen monitoring and documentation of living up to commitments, and also responding to violations and having redress opportunities at the national and regional level. At the moment, these commitments have little teeth, so there's a need to emphasize and push on that. There's also the question of disaggregated data on assembly and association, including in online spaces, and the divides and the violence that exists online, and there's a need for more transparency and data in that context. There's also a discussion around the recommendation for funding, as others have mentioned as well, the need for more flexible funding, especially for young and grassroots women's organizations and feminists. And there was also, in the context of monitoring and reporting, there needs to be more funding, and that, supporting those local organizations will also support that. There's also a need to go beyond project-based funding, which doesn't actually respond to and reflect the views and situations of women human rights defenders that receive some of these funds. So there's a need to look at that aspect as well in the context of funding. Of course, an important point is also the recommendation to address traditional cultural norms, gender norms and stereotypes, particularly those around women's roles and how they still remain to be seen as a role that is limited to the home. Then there are recommendations around online assembly and association, especially as things move more and more online in response to the pandemic as well. This means enabling women and girls to participate and assemble online, including with access, privacy, the digital divides, violence, but also access to phones and tools to be able to get online, and having that, and also being invited in online spaces and online discussions. Second to last point is on recommendations for trainings and capacity building, particularly about how to claim your rights to freedom of assembly and association, and more broadly, but also around online assembling and organizing online, including around digital security, but making sure that those trainings are understandable, easy to understand, and also in languages, many languages, not just the languages of English and French, but also specific languages in rural communities. And the last point was about raising awareness, also with women and girls and LGBTI people, on the right to assemble and how to claim them, and really emphasizing that there is a space for them where their voices really matter and are valued. And in some cases, this is in some context, this is not the case, and that's something that also is an important aspect to address.
Thank you so much, Ruben, for that summary. We have had one question come through, and so I'm going to send this question over to Sudita. I think you're still on the call. I can't see, there's a lot of people. And the question that has come through is from Cynthia. I'm particularly interested in looking at ways rights related to assembly are now seen as competing with public health regulations and implications for WHRD. Also, what are the impacts on documentation of context and violations? Sudita?
Thank you so much for the question. So I would say that a lot of young women and girls also learns how to gather online which is, is like social distancing already. And then they use a lot of social medias, use of Twitter, Facebooks together, so information, they can send the petitions. There's other ways that they can do without, gatherings, and then can comply with the health like distancings. And then also that in our organizations, we look into how we can put literacies in terms of the online for the young women or the girls, how that they can protect their privacies, and also approach the governments, how that everyone can access to the internet, and then use the opportunity to, raise kind of other issues related to sexual reproductive health and rights and LGBTQI issues. So the online could be the solutions, and I think that it could be the long-run solutions when the COVID is once go away in a very quickly. And also the girls, we are taking the safety of the girls very seriously. So it would take long for us before we'll be able to support the young girls and women to put together. That is what is the solution for us for now.
Thank you so much, Sudhita. We have 8 minutes left in this kind of discussion period. And Clément, and also to the wider audience, I want to open it up to you, Clément, if you have any questions for the participants and the speakers, and also vice versa, participants and speakers, if you have any questions directly for Clément as well, now is the opportunity in the next 7 minutes to ask them. Clément, we'll hand it over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Uma, for the this conversation, but also thanks to all of the groups, but also those who did the report for this wonderful feedback. I think there's quite a lot, and due to the time, I prefer to also give you the possibility to ask me any question about what is the process, how am I going to do, what's the next step. But just one thing that I want also to kind of raise here. I think in the process of this reporting, I would also appreciate any kind of experience that, or any kind of case you can also send to me in relation to the challenge, or in relation to the targeting movement, or in relation to the best practice in your country in relation to the achieving specific human rights issue by mobilizing and everything. Because what I want to do, like I told you before, is that I want also, for me, the celebration is also to show those achievements and to say that this is what, while the world is going crazy currently, I still believe that women are the one that will also save us from completely collapsing. And we are seeing this today through the all fighting against racism and everything. So that's one thing. The second thing also, I know some people talk about funding, which is really important. And I already asked this question in the group that I was, that it's important also to keep in mind that the COVID-19 issue is not just about health issue, about human rights issues. So we need also to make sure that donors understand that shifting funding to the issues that will derive women from their main target and that will diminish their activism will not be a good thing to serve to the movement. So we need, and this is what in my discussion I already remind the founder that we need to be careful that we don't now direct women on only doing the health or support issue to the community, but they need to continue to do those activism that is important, advocacy and everything. So the funding need to be increased, because now we have so many regulations that we need to implement before we organize activity, and they need also to keep this funding, not shifting them to the social support and all of those things. So if you have any issue like that, please let me know, get back to me, because I think that funding is important when we talk about activism. Without this, the right to association doesn't really mean. If you are not able to implement your work, if you are not able to organize, then you won't be able also to achieve, to impact really the society. So I prefer to give you the time to ask me any kind of question, but if I have any question later on, I can also ask Una, and there's quite a number of staff that support me. They are also in different groups. They can also send you email about those questions.
Thank you so much, Kamal. We do have a question from Annie that's come in, and the question to you is, do you plan on including the specific problem of online threats and violence faced by young feminists online?
Yes, I think for sure. This was also a little bit, not really detailed, part of my 2019 report that I presented to the Human Rights Council online. A big part of this report was also dedicated to the women. But I think this we cannot, and we see how the COVID time now, only online was the space that we can be able to continue our activism. And I hear from the group that I was attended on COVID-19, how also some of the surveillance hijacking the discussion around the women issue or posting some image. So I think definitely this will be part of the reports.
Great, thank you so much, Clement. Does anyone have any further questions for Clement at this time? Passy, thank you so much. Clement, another question. What about the security and safety of women and girls in this context of conflict, like in the DRC, where freedom of expression is facing restrictions and regulations?
Well, safety, I think, if I understood well the question, what the report will address that, or what's the concrete question, if the report will address those issues, right?
Yes, what about the security?
Yes. Yeah, we know that if you take the example of DRC in particular, when it comes to the conflict area in east of DRC, we know that regarding the violence against women, women are in front that's fighting this, and we know how not just the government, but also the non-state actor target those women and get that now becoming activists. And I think also one thing that I noticed also that, and this is also linked to the women, is also that now we are also seeing that young women are so active on online space and so professional in organizing and mobilizing and everything. And I know that little by little some governments are really targeting those young women, knowing that they professional themselves in this area. You can see a lot of, if you can see a lot of bloggers, you can see that a lot of them are also women that were targets around the world. You can also notice also most of the revolution or most of the demonstration we had from Sudan and everything, that women are always those who really voice the message, the first message of this. And it's also, it would be important also that whenever this report was addressing that, we can also say that when it comes to the transition, when it comes to the sharing the power, there are those who are left behind also. So this needs to be redressed. This needs to be balanced now. So I will also be really keen also to hear from you. How do we make this report really interesting? I don't want this report to be another report on top of the report, but this report that speaks for future. This report that taking from the past, build for future, and also prepare ourselves for what we are all foreseeing that the post-conflict will look like. And then how will you, women, in the broader movements can stand up to fight against the authoritarian that we are seeing coming up? How do we ensure that women will be in front to support democracies that is now undermined by the fact that some of the democracy may be agreed that we're not properly addressing the COVID issues or whatever. So there are so many issues coming up that I think we still need women movements to continue to hold the flag. And how do we ensure that this report is one tool to help for that, to build this, to make the wake-up call for the international community. That for many years, women were in front, and they should be in front to help us to go through this challenge that the world will be facing after the COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Clement. Unfortunately, Zamdina, we're not able to get to your question. Ona, I will just direct you that there is a question for Clement there, and maybe we can answer it post. Additionally, please note that the call to input for Clement's report is still open, and the deadline for submissions is the 12th of June, which is this Friday, and we'll in the Zoom chat box. So please fill this in, share it with your network so that Clement can have as much data as possible. In the last kind of 10 minutes of this call, 12 minutes of this call, let's say, we're going to head over to Nalini from the Fiji Women's Rights Movement. And Nalini is going to be speaking to what needs to be done by UN bodies to ensure freedom of association and assembly rights, or working to protect women and girls. Nalini, thank you so much. Passing over to you.
Thanks, Uma. It's a pleasure to be in this forum. I think a lot of what I wanted to say has been sort of sprinkled across the conversation that we've been having. But specifically, I've been asked to look at ways forward for the United Nations bodies and member states. So we do know the challenges that the United Nations as a system, is going through, but and the laboriousness in terms of the processes, etc., in terms of human rights accountability. But the United Nations does play a very crucial role in protecting women's human rights, including promoting progressive national and regional mechanisms and processes that support women and their human rights. So in that light, I would like to highlight 5 points as ways forward, and touching on the maybe more specific Fiji-based examples, because that's a region that we have not really heard from in the conversations with the other speakers. So the first point is that there should be a way to ensure that member states are working towards dismantling patriarchal structures and norms. Patriarchal attitudes and stereotypes reinforce the narrow view of women's roles being confined only to the private sphere, and that is very discouraging. So we believe that any change in policy, legislative, even institutional structures will not be able to produce the desired positive social change if there is no gender transformation occurring in terms of shifting negative perceptions, bias, belief systems which operate to perpetuate various patterns of inequalities and forms of discrimination against women. So in the Pacific region, in a positive light, the Fiji government has recognized patriarchy as the root cause of gender-based violence. And having said that, we are saying that calling out the real problem is definitely a step in the right direction. So second point in here is that we encourage member states to carry out meaningful engagement and collaborative work with women's rights organizations, grassroots women's groups, faith-based and other organizations such as trade unions, etc., in addressing societal and cultural norms that act as barriers for women and girls to exercise their rights in terms of assembly and association. The collaborative work is being done in some countries in our region, but this is largely missing in many of the small island states in the Pacific. The second point I'd like to make is that the UN human rights bodies need to take and call for stronger stand on member states to repeal or amend provisions which do not allow for freedom of assembly and association. There are many countries in the Pacific region that have existing provisions for strategies and measures that protect women's human rights. However, these existing laws and policies are not in par with international human rights principles and instruments that promote and protect women's rights. So member states should conduct a robust review of existing laws and policies that impede on women's human rights, and particularly on the right to freely assemble and associate, which we see in a situation like we have now, a pandemic, where there's serious curtailment of those rights. In Fiji, let me further add that the freedom of assembly and association are enshrined in our constitution which was done up in 2013. However, like in many other countries in the region, women and girls are not able to meaningfully exercise those rights. There are, as we have it, all these rights have limitations on the basis of national security, public safety, and order, health, and the conduct of elections, or when we have infringes on the rights and freedoms of the others. So that is quite a serious set of limitations that come into play every now and then. So these limitations have little to no clarity on the demarcation, which leaves room for various interpretations by the stakeholders, thus becomes very dangerous and creates a climate of fear and exacerbates the existing vulnerabilities of women and girls who would want to exercise their rights. So in the past, women human rights defenders have experienced the use of violence from the police, who have tried to, assemble and associate. Secondly, there has been continued police harassment, detention, and arrest of trade unions and denial of permits for peaceful protests. On workers' rights in Fiji's over the past, few years. Prominent women-led trade unions who have for years vocally exercised their rights for free assembly have now been silenced completely because of continued government response to any form of activism involving trade unions. However, when we had our Universal Periodic Review last year, Fiji accepted recommendations to uphold the freedom of assembly by ensuring that the criminal statutes, such as those enshrined in a Public Order Act, are not used to curtail workers' right to form and join trade unions and to assemble. However, that is not the case as we see it now. Another point in here is what we have seen globally. We've seen member states that host the COP negotiations recently have been appallingly restrictive in terms of freedom of assembly and the right for urgent action and international cooperation. We've seen climate activists in Spain last year that were pushed out of the meeting venue, were locked out, in the cold, and and this year we see in Poland there's actually a bill banning spontaneous demonstrations and subjectifying activists to surveillance and collection of their data. The third point I would like to make is there has to be some encouragement of member states to accept invitation of rapporteurs and other mechanisms to visit the countries and to ensure that the voices of women and girls are put forward through that process. So in Fiji, we know that there's an open standing invitation for special procedures to visit, but these visits don't occur in a vacuum. There needs to be ample support provided to special procedures to come in and listen to all the perspectives around the issue that is being looked at. And we've seen very recently, there have been many cases of police raids of homes and offices of those who try to organize the public. There's a definite element of intimidation in terms of opening up and speaking about the real issues and situation. And therefore, when we have the special mandates coming to visit, and then having an opportunity to speak to everyone, it becomes a way of holding the state accountable. We also urge the special rapporteurs to engage in meaningful advocacy and public awareness that benefits women and girls in highlighting their realities. It would be beneficial to have a collaborative approach with continuous engagement rather than periodic visits and reports, The continuous engagement will strengthen the political will of all relevant stakeholders in advancing the rights of women and girls. My fourth point and second last point is that the United Nations must encourage member states to participate in state reporting on the various human rights conventions so that the states can expressively capture actions towards protecting women and girls' rights for assembly and association. In my region, the Pacific, not all the countries have ratified all the relevant human rights conventions. Therefore, we have a situation where women human rights defenders are under threat for the work they do and often have limited or no protection at all. They have added threats to their families. And this is, as we've talked about, one aspect of the gender threats where the women human rights defenders, children's or relatives are threatened as well. While in the case of male human rights defenders is perceived as more individual cases. Women who are journalists are targeted and harassed for the work they do in terms of, reporting on, the issues they do on. And often due to the culture in the newsrooms, they do not have a way to seek justice. And finally, we think the UN should encourage the national human rights institutions to be Paris Principle compliant. National human rights institutions who have Paris Principle compliance play a key role in the independently reporting of the state's compliance in protecting fundamental human rights, even more so when the right of trade unions to organize and peacefully assemble are being threatened. And the last point in here is, we really don't have too many countries in the Pacific, that have national human rights institutions that are fulfilling their mandated roles to independently monitor and report on human rights violations. So if member states and national human rights institutions cannot answer to that question, then of course that needs to be addressed immediately. So those are some of the points that I wanted to share specifically in relation to UN agencies, mechanisms, and member states. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nalini. We have just a couple more minutes left, and so I want to turn it over to Ona from ICNL to talk about kind of the next steps in terms of the timeline of this report. Ona.
Thank you, Uma. Yes, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Ona Flores. I work as an external advisor to the Special Rapporteur Voulet, and I'm very privileged to be working with him in the process of researching for this report. So before I give the floor to him, I just want to explain a little bit the process that we are, this consultation, everything that you've said here and share with us I'll collect it with others that are in the calling and make sure the rapporteur has a clear, all good notes and clear messages that you kindly share with us today. And Clement, the rapporteur, is going to present this report in the month of October, but this report is being finalized in the next 2 months. So very important, if you have the time to share also in written form some of your inputs for this Friday, you're more than welcome. You don't have to answer all the questions. I know it's a long questionnaire. You're happy to do that. We're very happy if you do that. But if you concentrate in certain key points that given the time frame that you have, we encourage you to do so. Uma has shared that in the chat, the link. And in any way, it's in the website of the Special Rapporteur at the OHCHR. And the last thing I want to mention is that this is an ongoing conversation with civil society and other groups that Clement, the rapporteur, has engaged with. Obviously, it will be the presentation of the report in October, where we hope to have other webinars, other discussions, hopefully in person, if not online as well, and other ideas of how to move it's not only a report that, like the rapporteur says, that stays there, but it also moves to effective implementation and change. So with that, I hope that you will receive emails from me, from UMA, from other organizations to continue promoting the report, their results, and thinking of new ways to continue to collaborate.
Clement, handing it over to you to close us out.
Yes, thank you, Ona, and I think you perfectly already laid down what are the next steps. And I think one of the important things also for you to probably take is that, as I mentioned at many times, I'm not, my purpose is not to do another report among others. That's why the plan is, by doing these reports, I would like also at the end of the process, whenever the COVID allows us, we can also meet to discuss about what concrete implementation of the recommendation. This is why I'm trying as much as I can to involve other UN agency or other rapporteurs that work on this issue so that we can come up with a report that speaks really about the women movement, how women and girls enjoy these fundamental rights to advance the society, because we know that the future is not looking what we hope. So we need a strong civil society, and strong civil society means also strong women movements. And this is why this, for me, this report is one of the reports that I don't want to be kind of, it's not a literature, it's about action, it's about what is happening, it's about the future, it's where are we heading to, what we need in order to be able to achieve the sustainable development. What do you need in order to prevent the collapsing of a democracy? What do we need to stop emergence of authoritarian regime? What do you need really in order to support the well-being, to reduce inequality, racial discrimination, in order to build best society? And I know women are in core of this. And today the young women and young they are showing us from the climate change and everything. So I need you to come up with things that excite you in terms of you as a women working in this area, how you are able to mobilize. And I always say that if you work as a women human rights defenders, human rights defenders in general, and you are not able also to mobilize, you are not able also to really show through your work how you are able to impact society. If you are not able to connect, then you're still in the little box. So that's why it's good that this report helps us to open up, to kind of see where our work and how enjoying these fundamental rights make us to be citizens of the world, make us to be in front of those challenges, in front of inequality, how we fight them, how we push back them. So I think Ona already laid down the ground for the next step. And for me, I'm now waiting for you to tell me what to put in this report. What do you think this report, how do you think this report will make sense for you? So this is for you now. I open up the door, please let me know what you want to see in this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Special Rapporteur Boulay. Thank you to all of our speakers, Alexandra, Colette, Amal, Meheli, Sudita, Nalini, for your contributions and interventions. Thank you to all of our partners who have helped to hold this space for discussion. As Ona said, you will be receiving an email from us with the link to submit to the report, and we look forward to your further contributions and participation. Thank you for sticking with this webinar for close to 3 hours now. We hope take a break and get some coffee or tea or dinner, whatever wherever you are time zone wise. Thank you for those who have woken up at 1 a.m. to be here. We appreciate it. Take care, everybody, and we will be in touch. Thank you.
Thanks to our presenter. Thank you. And let's